The bitter wind howled through the narrow streets of Willow Creek, Colorado, as Darlene Winters dragged her leather suitcase along the muddy thoroughfare, tears freezing on her cheeks in the autumn chill of 1879. At 30 years old, she had never imagined finding herself abandoned, betrayed, and utterly alone in a frontier town where whispers followed her like shadows. "Mind your step there, madam," called a gruff voice as Darlene stumbled on a loose board in the sidewalk. She looked up, blinking away tears to see a weathered sign swinging above her head. Willow Creek Boarding House. The journey from Denver had drained her last reserves of strength. 2 weeks ago, her husband of 7 years, Jeremiah, had packed his belongings and left with Lucille Harmon, the 20-year-old daughter of the town banker. The scandal had spread faster than wildfire in a dry summer. Now, with nothing but $20 to her name, a trunk of clothes and the painful ache of humiliation, Darlene had fled to this remote mining town where nobody knew her story, or so she thought. "You'll be wanting a room, I suppose," said the older woman who answered the door. Her gray hair was pulled into a severe bun, and her eyes, though not unkind, assessed Darlene with practiced scrutiny. "I'm Mrs. Peterson. It's $2 a week, meals included." Darlene nodded, relieved. "That would be most appreciated." Mrs. Peterson led her up a narrow staircase. "You're from Denver, aren't you? Got family around these parts?" "No family," Darlene said quietly. "I'm here for a fresh start." Mrs. Peterson's expression softened momentarily. "Well, fresh starts are the currency of the West, dear. Rooms small but clean. Breakfast at 6, supper at 7. No gentlemen callers after 8. Darlene almost laughed at that. "No gentlemen callers at all, I expect." Once alone, she sank onto the narrow bed and finally allowed the tears to flow freely. The small room felt like a prison cell compared to the comfortable home she'd shared with Jeremiah. Their home had been her pride, the curtains she'd sewn, the garden she'd tended. All of it gone now, sold to pay debts she hadn't known existed until Jeremiah vanished. Morning came too quickly. Darlene dressed in her plainest skirt and shirtwaist, pinning her honey-brown hair into a simple knot. Her reflection in the small mirror showed a woman she barely recognized, eyes hollowed by grief, lips pressed thin with determination. "I need work," she told Mrs. Peterson over a breakfast of cornbread and coffee. The landlady nodded thoughtfully. "Not much for ladies here. There's the laundry, but Chinese workers have most of those positions. Might try the mercantile. Mr. Hoffman lost his clerk last month to gold fever." Hoffman's General Store stood at the heart of Willow Creek's Main Street, a 2-story clapboard building with a covered porch and windows displaying everything from ladies' bonnets to mining equipment. Inside, the rich smell of coffee beans, leather, and dried goods filled the air. "Mr. Hoffman." Darlene approached the counter where a balding man with spectacles was recording figures in a ledger. "That's me," he replied without looking up. "What can I help you with, Mrs. Darlene corrected reflexively, though the title now felt hollow. "Mrs. Winters." "I understand you might be in need of a clerk." That got his attention. He peered at her over his glasses. "A female clerk. I can read, write, and calculate figures. I maintained all the household accounts in my previous situation." Mr. Hoffman seemed unconvinced. "This isn't ladies' work, Mrs. Winters. Heavy lifting, dealing with rough miners. I need the position, Mr. Hoffman," Darlene interrupted, surprised by her own boldness. "I won't disappoint you." Before he could respond, the bell above the door jangled and both turned to see a tall man enter. His presence seemed to fill the store, instantly broad shoulders beneath a worn leather duster, a Stetson pulled low over eyes the color of a summer storm. Dust from the trail covered his boots and pants, and a holstered revolver rested against his thigh. "Morning, Nate," Hoffman called, visibly relieved by the interruption. "Didn't expect you in town so soon." "Storm's coming in from the north," the man replied, his voice deep and rough like whiskey over gravel. "Needed supplies before the pass closes." His gaze shifted to Darlene, acknowledging her with a slight nod. "Nathaniel Quinn, this here's Mrs. Winters," Hoffman said. "New in town, looking for work." The cowboy Nathaniel studied her with an intensity that made Darlene want to look away, but she held his gaze, refusing to be diminished further. "Pleasure, madam," he said finally. "Mr. Quinn owns the Broken Spur Ranch outside town," Hoffman explained to Darlene. "One of our most valued customers." Nathaniel Quinn removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. "You got experience with books, Mrs. Winters?" The question caught her off guard. "I do, yes." He turned to Hoffman. "Could use someone to organize my accounts. Last cattle sale paperwork is a mess, and the bank's breathing down my neck about that loan." Darlene's heart skipped. "I could help with that." Nathaniel considered her for a long moment. "Pays fair. Room and board included at the ranch." "I couldn't possibly," Darlene began, alarmed at the impropriety of living at a bachelor's ranch. "My housekeeper, Mrs. Flores, has been with me for years," he added, seeming to understand her concern. "She's got a spare room in her cabin you could take. Nothing improper about it." Hoffman cleared his throat. "Nate's good people, Mrs. Winters. His word means something in these parts." Darlene hesitated. Leave town just after arriving, work at a ranch of all places, yet the certainty of employment beckoned. "When would you need me to start?" she asked carefully. "Today." "Storm won't wait on formalities." He gestured toward the window, where dark clouds were already gathering on the distant mountains. 2 hours later, Darlene found herself perched beside Nathaniel Quinn in his wagon, her hastily packed suitcase secured in the back. The road out of Willow Creek twisted through pine forests and rocky outcroppings, climbing steadily into the foothills. They rode in silence for nearly an hour before Nathaniel spoke. "What brings you to Willow Creek, Mrs. Winters?" Darlene clutched her hands tighter in her lap. "A new beginning." He nodded, not pressing further, and she was grateful. The fewer people who knew her shame, the better. As the wagon crested a hill, the Broken Spur Ranch came into view, a sprawling main house built of logs and stone, several outbuildings, a large barn, and corrals where horses grazed despite the threatening weather. Beyond, cattle dotted the valleys and hillsides. "It's beautiful," Darlene said, genuinely impressed. "Been in my family 20 years, Nathaniel replied, a hint of pride breaking through his reserve. "My father came out from Boston in '59, built it from nothing." "And your mother," his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Died on the journey west. I was 10. "I'm sorry," Darlene said softly. "Long time ago now." He flicked the reins, urging the horses forward as raindrops began to spatter around them. Mrs. Flores proved to be a round, cheerful Mexican woman who welcomed Darlene with immediate warmth. Her cabin, a short walk from the main house, was small but tidy, with colorful woven blankets and the scent of chili peppers and cinnamon in the air. "You rest now," she insisted, showing Darlene to a bedroom barely larger than her boarding house accommodations but somehow more welcoming. "Mr. Nate, he works too hard, expects everyone else to do the same. But first you eat." That evening, sitting at Mrs. Flores's table eating the most delicious stew Darlene had tasted in years, the storm unleashed its fury outside. Thunder cracked overhead, rain lashed the windows, and wind howled through the eaves. Yet somehow, Darlene felt safer than she had in months. Morning brought brilliant sunshine and a world washed clean. Mrs. Flores escorted Darlene to the ranch house after breakfast, pointing out the various buildings and introducing her to ranch hands they passed. Most tipped their hats respectfully, though Darlene felt their curious glances follow her. "The boss is in there, Mrs. Flores said, pointing to a small room off the main parlor. "His father's old study. All the papers, they are in a terrible mess. Good luck, Senora." Darlene squared her shoulders and knocked on the half-open door. "Come in," called Nathaniel's deep voice. The room was indeed a disaster. Papers covered every surface, ledgers lay open and abandoned, and receipts were pinned to the walls in no apparent order. Nathaniel stood by the window, looking out over his domain, a cup of coffee in hand. "I warned you," he said, turning to face her. 5 years of neglect. Why?" Darlene couldn't help asking. He shrugged. "My father kept immaculate records. After he died, I thought I could do the same. Turns out running the ranch took all my time. Now the bank wants proof of profits before extending my loan for new breeding stock." Darlene removed her shawl and hung it on a peg by the door. "I'll need a system, some organization. Whatever you need." She spent that first day simply sorting sales receipts in one pile, purchase orders in another, correspondence with the bank in a third. By sunset, her back ached and her fingers were stained with ink and dust, but the chaos had begun to take shape. Days fell into a pattern. Darlene would rise at dawn, breakfast with Mrs. Flores, then work in the study until noon. After a quick lunch, she'd continue until evening, sometimes joined by Nathaniel when he wasn't attending to ranch business. On her 4th day, a commotion in the yard drew her to the window. Nathaniel and several hands were attempting to break a magnificent black stallion that fought against the ropes with wild determination. Darlene found herself unable to look away as Nathaniel approached the heaving animal, speaking words she couldn't hear, but in a tone that gradually calmed the horse's frantic movements. His patience was infinite, his movements sure but gentle. When he finally swung into the saddle, man and horse battled briefly before finding a tentative harmony. Something about the scene made Darlene's breath catch the raw power, tempered by mutual respect. That evening, as she organized a stack of cattle sale records, Nathaniel appeared in the doorway, his shirt torn and a fresh bruise darkening his jaw. "That's enough for today," he said. "You'll ruin your eyes in this light." "I've nearly finished with the sales from 77, she replied, reluctant to stop when progress was finally visible. He crossed to her desk and gently closed the ledger. "The work will wait." His proximity unsettled her. She could smell leather and horses and pine, could see a thin scar running along his jawline that she hadn't noticed before. "I saw you with the stallion today," she said, stepping back slightly. "You have quite a way with him." Nathaniel's expression softened. "Midnight just needs to understand we're not enemies. Like most wild things, he fights hardest when he's scared." "Is that your approach to everything?" Darlene asked, finding courage in the gathering shadows. "Patience and understanding." He considered her question with surprising seriousness. "Not always, but I've found force rarely wins what gentle persistence can achieve." A call from outside interrupted them. One of the hands needed Nathaniel's attention for a sick calf. He departed with a nod, leaving Darlene to wonder at the unexpected depth beneath his stoic exterior. 2 weeks passed. The ranch's financial records gradually transformed from chaos to order under Darlene's methodical hand. She discovered that, despite the disorganization, the Broken Spur was actually quite profitable. Nathaniel simply hadn't documented it properly for the bank. "Mr. Quinn," she said one afternoon, excitement in her voice, "I believe I've found your solution." He looked up from a map he'd been studying. "Nathaniel," he corrected. "After all this time in my mess, I think you've earned the right to use my name." She faltered momentarily. Nathaniel, then. According to my calculations, you've been underselling your cattle by nearly 10% compared to market rates. But even so, your profit margins exceed what the bank requires for the loan. You simply need to present the figures correctly. He moved to stand beside her, examining the neatly arranged columns she'd prepared. His sleeve brushed against hers, and Darlene found herself acutely aware of his nearness. "You've performed a miracle here," he said softly. "Hardly a miracle, just organization." His eyes met hers with an intensity that made her heart flutter treacherously. "Thank you, Darlene." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something in his voice when he said it made her cheeks warm. "I should finish these calculations," she murmured, looking away. That night, Darlene couldn't sleep. Her thoughts kept returning to Nathaniel, his quiet strength, his unexpected gentleness, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he almost smiled. It frightened her, this growing awareness. She was still legally married, still nursing the raw wound of Jeremiah's betrayal. And yet, the following Sunday, Mrs. Flores insisted Darlene accompany her to church in Willow Creek. "You need more than numbers and ledgers, Senora," she declared. "Besides, new dress is wasted if no one sees it." The dress in question was one Darlene had made from fabric Nathaniel had brought back from town, a soft blue calico she'd sewn by lamplight in the evenings. She hadn't intended to wear it so soon, but Mrs. Flores's enthusiasm was difficult to resist. The small church was nearly full when they arrived. Darlene followed the housekeeper to a pew, conscious of curious glances from the townspeople. She hadn't expected to see Nathaniel, assuming he would remain at the ranch, but he entered just as the service was beginning, nodding to several people before sliding into the pew beside Darlene. His shoulder pressed against hers in the crowded space. He smelled of soap and clean linen, his usual trail dust and horse scent absent. He'd shaved, too, she noted. After the service, they stood in the churchyard as Mrs. Flores chatted animatedly with friends. Several women approached Darlene, introducing themselves with the transparent curiosity of a small town meeting a newcomer. "Mrs. Winters is helping organize my accounts," Nathaniel explained when asked, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back in a gesture that felt oddly protective. "How fortunate for you," remarked an older woman with assessing eyes. "A pretty widow with a head for figures." Darlene froze. "I'm not." "Mrs. Chambers enjoys speculation," Nathaniel interrupted smoothly. "Darlene is indeed an asset to the Broken Spur, whatever her circumstances." On the ride back to the ranch, Darlene finally gathered her courage. "I should have corrected that woman." Nathaniel's eyes remained on the road. "Your past is your business, but now they think I'm a widow." "Better than the truth?" he asked quietly. Darlene's breath caught. "You know." He nodded once. "Willow Creek has an efficient telegraph. Word came from Denver about a week after you arrived." Humiliation washed over her anew. "So everyone knows that my husband left me for a younger woman, that I wasn't enough to keep him." Her voice broke on the last words. Nathaniel pulled the wagon to a halt, turning to face her fully. "What I know is that a man who would abandon his wife after 7 years for a girl barely grown is no man at all." Tears burned in Darlene's eyes. "You don't understand. I failed him. I couldn't give him children. After years of trying, the doctor said I never would. Jeremiah wanted a family. So he betrayed his vows." Nathaniel's voice hardened. "He was a fool, Darlene." The words hung between them, a perfect echo of her own thoughts in her darkest moments. That Nathaniel would voice them so plainly, with such conviction, broke something in her. The tears she'd been fighting spilled over. Without hesitation, Nathaniel reached for her, drawing her against his chest. She should have resisted, maintained propriety, but the solid strength of him was too great a comfort to deny. His hand moved in gentle circles on her back as she wept. "I'm sorry," she finally managed, pulling away and wiping her eyes. "I don't usually." "No apologies needed," he said gruffly. "Some things need breaking before they can heal properly." The weeks that followed brought subtle changes. Darlene completed the organization of the ranch's finances, presenting Nathaniel with clearly documented evidence of the Broken Spur's prosperity. Together, they rode into Willow Creek to meet with the banker, who approved the loan with surprising enthusiasm. "Told you she was worth hiring," the banker said to Nathaniel with a knowing smile that made Darlene uncomfortable. Outside the bank, Nathaniel surprised her. "I've got a proposal for you." Her heart stuttered ridiculously before he continued. "Stay on at the ranch. Not just for the accounts, though Lord knows they'll fall into disarray without you, but as my assistant manager. You've got a head for business I lack, and with the new breeding stock coming in, I could use the help." The offer stunned her. "I don't know the first thing about ranching. You're a quick study, and it would mean a proper salary, not just room and board, independence, security." The things she'd never had with Jeremiah, who'd controlled every aspect of their finances. The thought was intoxicating. "I accept," she said, and was rewarded with one of Nathaniel's rare, full smiles. December arrived with biting cold and snow that transformed the landscape into a glittering wonderland. Darlene discovered she enjoyed ranch life far more than she'd expected. Nathaniel taught her to ride properly, and she spent increasing time outdoors, helping with the horses and learning the rhythms of the Broken Spur. Christmas preparations consumed the ranch. Mrs. Flores baked endlessly, filling the air with cinnamon and ginger. Darlene helped decorate the main house with pine boughs and red ribbons, feeling a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. On Christmas Eve, Nathaniel surprised everyone by organizing a celebration for the entire ranch. The Hands and their families gathered in the main house, where tables groaned with food and a fiddle player provided music for dancing. Darlene wore her best dress, a deep green wool she'd altered to the current fashion. She'd pinned her hair up but left a few curls loose at her temples, a style she'd abandoned years ago when Jeremiah commented it looked childish. "You look beautiful," Nathaniel said when she entered, his voice pitched for her ears alone. He wore a crisp white shirt and black vest, his usual trail clothes exchanged for what was clearly his Sunday best. "Thank you," she replied, flustered by the naked admiration in his eyes. "You clean up rather well yourself." The evening passed in a blur of laughter, music, and more happiness than Darlene had felt in memory. When Nathaniel finally claimed her for a dance, his hand at her waist felt like it belonged there. They moved together with surprising grace for a cowboy and a former city wife, and Darlene was aware of approving glances from Mrs. Flores and others. Near midnight, as the celebration wound down, Nathaniel drew her outside to the porch. Snow was falling gently, adding to the thick blanket already covering the yard. Their breath made clouds in the frigid air. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small package from his pocket. "But I haven't," she began, embarrassed. "You've given the Broken Spur more than enough." He pressed the package into her hands. "Open it." Inside was a delicate silver pendant shaped like a horse in full gallop. Simple but beautifully crafted, it hung from a slender chain. "It's exquisite," she whispered. "Reminded me of you," he said. "Strong, graceful, determined, Nathaniel." She looked up at him, uncertain what to say. He took the necklace from her fingers and moved behind her. She felt his warm breath on her neck as he fastened the chain, his fingers brushing her skin. When he turned her to face him again, his expression was more open than she'd ever seen it. "I know you're still married in name," he said quietly. "I know that's a barrier neither of us can ignore, but I want you to know that if that changes, I'll be waiting." The declaration hung in the crystal air between them. He wasn't asking for anything, wasn't pressuring her, merely stating a truth as he saw it. The honesty of it took her breath away. "I don't know if it ever will change," she admitted. "Divorce is scandalous. Yes, impossible, no." His hands found hers. "I'm a patient man, Darlene Winters. And some things are worth waiting for." The new year brought change to the Broken Spur. The breeding stock arrived, magnificent bulls that would improve the ranch's herd, and with them came increased responsibility for both Nathaniel and Darlene. She took over managing the household accounts entirely, freeing him to focus on the cattle and the land. Winter's grip began to ease by late February. The snow retreated, revealing patches of mud and the first tender shoots of green. Darlene discovered wild crocuses blooming near Mrs. Flores's cabin one morning and picked a small bunch, placing them in a cup on her desk. When she returned from inspecting a new foal with one of the hands, she found Nathaniel at her desk, examining a letter with a troubled expression. "What is it?" she asked, removing her shawl. He looked up, his face uncharacteristically grim. "This came for you." The envelope bore the Denver postmark and an all-too-familiar handwriting, Jeremiah. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal. "My dearest Darlene, I write with the most profound regret and sorrow for the pain I have caused you. My actions were those of a selfish, misguided fool. Lucille has left me for a banker's son in San Francisco, taking with her what little money we had. I have come to realize the grievous error of my judgment. The vows we exchanged before God and man still bind us, and I am determined to honor them. I will arrive in Willow Creek on March 15th to bring you home where you belong. Your devoted husband, Jeremiah." The letter fluttered from Darlene's fingers. "He wants me back," she whispered. "Lucille left him, and now he wants me back." Nathaniel's face was carefully expressionless. "And what do you want?" The question struck her with the force of revelation. No one, certainly not Jeremiah, had ever asked what she wanted. Her desires had always been secondary, assumed to align with her husband's. "I don't know," she admitted. "I never expected. You don't have to decide now." Nathaniel picked up the letter and returned it to her. "But remember, you have options you didn't have before. You're not the same woman he left behind." That night, Darlene couldn't sleep. She paced her small room, thoughts churning. Legally, she was still Jeremiah's wife. She had taken vows for better or worse. But hadn't he broken those same vows when he abandoned her? Didn't his infidelity release her from her obligation? And then there was Nathaniel. He'd made no demands, asked for no promises. Yet something profound had grown between them over the months, a foundation of respect and understanding that she'd never experienced with Jeremiah. March 15th arrived with brutal swiftness. Darlene dressed with care in a blue dress that brought out her eyes, her hair arranged simply but becomingly. The silver horse pendant rested at her throat, a talisman of sorts. "You don't have to face him alone," Nathaniel said as he helped her into the wagon for the trip to town. "Yes, I do," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "This is my battle." The stagecoach was scheduled to arrive at noon. Darlene waited in the hotel lobby, her stomach knotted with anxiety. When the distant rumble of wheels announced its approach, she moved to the window, watching as passengers disembarked. Jeremiah looked older, thinner than she remembered. His fashionable suit was worn at the elbows, his hair prematurely graying at the temples. When he spotted her through the window, his face lit with relief. "Darlene," he exclaimed, hurrying inside and reaching for her hands. "My darling, at last." She allowed him to grasp her fingers briefly before withdrawing them. "Hello, Jeremiah," he blinked, clearly expecting a warmer welcome. "You received my letter, then? You understand that I've come to bring you home." "I received it," she confirmed. "Let's sit. We have much to discuss." They settled in a quiet corner of the hotel restaurant. Jeremiah ordered coffee for them both, assuming as always that he knew her preference without asking. "You're looking well," he said, studying her. "Country life agrees with you, it seems. Though I'm eager to have you back in Denver where you belong. I've secured a position with Harmon's Bank again, ironically, thanks to my connection with Lucille." Old man Harmon was so embarrassed by his daughter's behavior that he— "Jeremiah," Darlene interrupted. "Why are you here? Really?" His smile faltered. "I told you in my letter I made a terrible mistake. I see that now. Because Lucille left you," his cheeks reddened. "That opened my eyes, certainly, but I've genuinely missed you, Darlene. Our home isn't the same without you." "Our home?" She raised an eyebrow. "You sold our home to pay your debts." "Well, yes, but we can build another, start fresh." Darlene took a sip of her coffee, using the moment to gather her thoughts. "Did you miss me when you were with Lucille? Did you think about me at all when you packed your things and left without even saying goodbye?" Jeremiah had the grace to look ashamed. "I was a coward, I admit it, but I've changed, learned from my mistakes." "As have I," Darlene said quietly. "I've learned that I deserve more than being someone's second choice, Jeremiah. More than being wanted only when the more exciting option disappears." His expression hardened. "You're my wife, Darlene. You took vows. So did you. Forsaking all others, I believe, were the words. One mistake doesn't erase 7 years of marriage." "It wasn't the affair that ended our marriage," Darlene replied, surprised by her own calm. "It was the years of making me feel that I wasn't enough, that my barrenness made me less of a woman, less worthy of love." Jeremiah's face flushed darker. "I never said, you didn't have to say it. I felt it every day." A tense silence fell between them. Outside the window, Darlene could see Willow Creek going about its business, merchants with their carts, women shopping, cowboys tying their horses at the saloon rail. A life continuing, with or without her personal drama. "What are you saying exactly?" Jeremiah finally asked. Darlene met his gaze directly. "I'm saying no, Jeremiah. I won't be returning to Denver with you. I've built something here, a life, work that matters, people who value me as I am." "People," his eyes narrowed. "Is there someone else? Is that what this is about?" Before she could answer, the restaurant door opened and Nathaniel entered. He didn't approach their table, merely nodded to Darlene before taking a seat at the counter. But the look that passed between them was enough for Jeremiah to notice. "Him?" Jeremiah's voice rose. "A cowboy. You've thrown away our marriage for some uneducated ranch hand." Heads turned at his outburst. Darlene saw Nathaniel tense but remained seated, respecting her wish to handle this herself. "Nathaniel Quinn owns the largest cattle ranch in the county," Darlene said evenly. "He's a respected businessman, a fair employer, and a man of integrity. But that's beside the point. I'm not leaving you for him. I'm leaving you for me." Jeremiah stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. Perhaps he was. The Darlene who had meekly accepted his every decision, who had bent herself into shapes trying to please him, no longer existed. "You can't just decide this," he sputtered. "We're still legally married." "Yes, we are," she agreed. "For now. But I intend to file for divorce on grounds of abandonment and adultery. I have witnesses who saw you leave Denver with Lucille. No judge will grant it. Think of the scandal." Darlene smiled faintly. "I've discovered I can survive scandal, Jeremiah. Can you?" His face contorted with anger, then calculation. "What about money? You have nothing without me." "I have a position with a regular salary. I've saved nearly every penny since arriving here. I have more independence now than I ever did as your wife." Jeremiah's shoulders slumped suddenly, the fight leaving him. For the first time, Darlene saw past his bluster to the desperate man beneath. He'd lost everything Lucille, his reputation, his money, and had counted on her taking him back without question. "Is there nothing I can say to change your mind?" he asked quietly. Darlene considered him, this man she'd once loved enough to pledge her life to. "You should know that I forgive you, Jeremiah, not for your sake but for mine. Carrying anger serves no purpose." He nodded slowly. "I suppose that's something." "The afternoon stage returns to Denver at 4, she said gently. "I think it would be best if you were on it. And if I contest the divorce, you won't," she replied with certainty. "Deep down, you know this is right. We made each other miserable toward the end. You deserve a fresh start as much as I do." Jeremiah studied her face for a long moment, then sighed deeply. "You've changed, Darlene." "Yes," she agreed. "I have." She left him there, walking out of the restaurant with a lightness in her step that belied the emotional weight of the encounter. Outside, the spring sunshine felt like a benediction. Nathaniel found her an hour later, sitting on a bench in the small town square, watching children play with marbles in the dirt. "How did it go?" he asked, settling beside her. "Better than expected," she replied. "He's returning to Denver today, I think. I think he'll agree to the divorce without much fight." Nathaniel nodded, his expression giving nothing away. "And how are you feeling about that?" Darlene considered the question carefully. "Relieved, sad for what might have been, but mostly free." His hand found hers on the bench between them, his calloused fingers entwining with her smaller ones. "Freedom suits you." That evening, as Darlene prepared for bed in her cabin, a knock came at her door. She opened it to find Nathaniel standing there, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I know it's late," he began, "but I couldn't sleep without saying this." "Come in," she offered, acutely aware of her loose hair and nightdress covered hastily with a shawl. He shook his head. "Better not, propriety and all that." He took a deep breath. "I meant what I said at Christmas, Darlene. I'll wait. However long the divorce takes, whatever comes, but I want you to know that my feelings go beyond admiration or friendship." Darlene's heart thundered in her chest. "Nathaniel, you don't need to say anything now," he interrupted gently. "You've had enough decisions for one day. I just wanted you to know where I stand." She stepped closer to him, just outside her threshold. "What if I want to say something now?" His eyes darkened. "Then I'm listening. I've spent my whole life being careful, making the safe choice the proper choice. Following rules that were never designed for my happiness." She reached up, her fingers lightly tracing the scar along his jaw. "I don't want to be careful anymore." Nathaniel remained perfectly still under her touch. "What do you want, Darlene?" "You," she whispered. "I want you." The word hung between them for a heartbeat before he closed the distance, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that started gentle but quickly blazed into something fierce and consuming. His arms encircled her, drawing her against the solid warmth of his chest as her hands slid up to tangle in his hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers. "I should go," he murmured, though he made no move to release her. "Yes," she agreed reluctantly. "You should." He brushed a final, feather-light kiss across her lips. "We'll do this right, Darlene. I promise you that." The divorce proceedings took 6 months faster than either had expected, thanks to Jeremiah's eventual cooperation and the testimony of several Denver witnesses to his abandonment. Judge Parker from the county seat handled the case with surprising discretion, and by October 1880, Darlene Winters was legally a free woman. She marked the occasion by moving from Mrs. Flores's cabin into a small house on the ranch property that Nathaniel had built during the summer months. Though they maintained separate residences, the entire county knew it was only a matter of time. That time came on a crisp November afternoon. Nathaniel had asked Darlene to ride with him to check on the herd in the north pasture, a task they'd completed dozens of times together. But today he led her past the cattle to a grove of aspens, their golden leaves shimmering in the autumn sunlight. A blanket had been spread beneath the trees, a picnic basket waiting. "What's all this?" Darlene asked, smiling as she dismounted. Nathaniel helped her down, his hands lingering at her waist. "Thought we deserved a celebration." "For what occasion?" Instead of answering, he took her hand and led her to the blanket. Once she was seated, he remained standing, suddenly looking as nervous as she'd ever seen him. "Darlene," he began, "when you came to the Broken Spur, I thought I was hiring an accountant. I had no idea I was meeting the woman who would change everything." Her breath caught as he lowered himself to one knee before her. "I love your intelligence, your courage, your heart. I love how you tame figures the way I tame horses, with patience and determination. I love watching you become more yourself every day." He withdrew a small box from his pocket. "I would be honored if you would become my wife, partner in all things, for as long as we both shall live." Inside the box was a ring, not a diamond, but a sapphire surrounded by tiny pearls, set in gold. It was nothing like the conventional ring Jeremiah had given her, and all the more perfect for that difference. "Yes," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "Yes, Nathaniel Quinn, I will marry you." His smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger was brighter than she'd ever seen it open, joyful, without reservation. When he gathered her into his arms, she felt the last pieces of her old self falling away, replaced by something stronger, truer. They were married 2 weeks later in the Willow Creek church, with Mrs. Flores weeping happily in the front pew, and the entire ranch staff in attendance. Darlene wore a cream-colored dress she'd made herself, with the silver horse pendant at her throat and wildflowers in her hair. Nathaniel, in a new black suit, couldn't take his eyes off her throughout the ceremony. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," declared the preacher, and the simple words held a weight and meaning that Darlene had never fully appreciated before. The celebration at the Broken Spur lasted well into the night. Even Mrs. Chambers, the town gossip, admitted they made a handsome couple. "Though I still say he's lucky she gave him a second glance after being married to a city man," she added, loud enough for Darlene to overhear. "I'm the lucky one," Darlene corrected her with a smile. "Sometimes it takes losing your way to find where you truly belong." Later, when the guests had departed and they were finally alone in the main house, their home now, Nathaniel pulled her into his arms. "Mrs. Quinn," he murmured against her hair. "That sounds strange," she admitted, "but wonderful." "It'll get less strange," he promised, leading her toward the stairs. "We have a lifetime for you to get used to it." Spring 1881 brought new life to the Broken Spur. Calves dotted the pastures, the garden behind the main house burst with vegetables and flowers, and Darlene discovered something she'd never expected: she was with child. But the doctor in Denver said it was impossible, she told Nathaniel when the ranch doctor confirmed her suspicion. Nathaniel gathered her close, his hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "Seems to me the impossible happens around here with surprising regularity. A city wife becomes a rancher. A confirmed bachelor finds a family. Why not this miracle too?" As her body changed, Darlene found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. The humiliation that had driven her from Denver now seemed like a distant memory, almost belonging to another woman entirely. Occasionally, news reached them of Jeremiah. He'd moved to San Francisco, was working for a shipping company, had perhaps found someone new. She wished him well with genuine sincerity. On a sweltering August night in 1881, after 15 hours of labor with Mrs. Flores and the local midwife attending, Darlene gave birth to a healthy son. Thomas Nathaniel Quinn announced his arrival with lusty cries that brought his father running from the porch where he'd been pacing all night. "He's perfect," Nathaniel whispered, cradling the tiny bundle with hands that trembled slightly. "Just like his mother." Darlene, exhausted but radiant, watched the man she loved holding their child. "He has your eyes, I think. And definitely your stubbornness. He certainly took his time deciding to arrive." Nathaniel laughed softly. "Good quality in these parts, determination." Life settled into new rhythms. Thomas Tommy, to everyone at the ranch, grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's serious expression and his mother's curious nature. Darlene continued managing the ranch's finances, but found her greatest joy in motherhood, something she'd resigned herself to never experiencing. In 1883, the Broken Spur expanded, purchasing the neighboring property when its aging owner decided to retire to California. The additional land made it the largest ranch in the county, bringing both prosperity and increased responsibility. That autumn, as they celebrated Tommy's second birthday with a small gathering of friends, Darlene felt a familiar flutter in her stomach, the first movements of their second child. She caught Nathaniel's eye across the room and smiled, a private communication that needed no words. Later, as they stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of fire, Tommy sleeping soundly inside, Nathaniel wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hands coming to rest protectively over her growing belly. "Happy?" he asked simply. Darlene leaned back against his chest, covering his hands with her own. "Beyond anything I could have imagined when I stepped off that stage in Willow Creek 4 years ago. You know," he said thoughtfully, "I never told you this, but I saw you that very first day. You were dragging your suitcase through the mud, looking like you'd lost everything but were too stubborn to admit it." She turned in his arms, surprised. "You did," he nodded. "Something about you stayed with me. When I saw you again in Hoffman's store, I knew I had to find a reason to bring you to the Broken Spur." "So the accounting mess was just an excuse," she teased. "Oh, the mess was real enough," he laughed, "but I would have invented one if necessary." Darlene stretched up to kiss him, still marveling at how this tall, strong man could be so gentle, so perfectly hers. "Thank you for rescuing me." Nathaniel shook his head, suddenly serious. "You rescued yourself, Darlene Quinn. I just had the good sense to be here when you did." Their second child, a daughter named Elizabeth Rose, arrived in March 1884, completing their family circle. The years that followed brought changes to the west. The railroad pushed deeper into the territory, bringing more settlers and civilization. Willow Creek grew from a dusty mining town into a respectable community with a proper school, where Tommy eventually became the top student in his class. Through it all, the Broken Spur flourished under their joint stewardship. Darlene's financial acumen, combined with Nathaniel's knowledge of cattle and land, created a legacy that would sustain generations to come. Together, they weathered droughts and blizzards, market fluctuations, and the inevitable conflicts that came with growth and change. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathaniel surprised Darlene with a journey to San Francisco, the grand city she'd always wanted to visit but never had. They stayed in a luxury hotel, attended the opera, and walked arm in arm along the waterfront, marveling at ships from exotic ports. "Do you ever regret it?" Nathaniel asked one evening as they strolled back to their hotel. Choosing the ranch over city life, Darlene considered the question, watching the gas lamps flicker to life along the fashionable street. Ladies in silk gowns and gentlemen in top hats passed by, a world away from their life at the Broken Spur. "Not for a single moment," she answered truthfully. This is lovely to visit, but it's not home. Nathaniel's arm tightened around her waist. And where is home, Mrs. Quinn? She smiled up at him, this man who had seen her broken and helped her rebuild without ever making her feel diminished. Home is wherever you and the children are. But, she added with a laugh, I wouldn't mind if it continued to include that view of the mountains from our porch. That can be arranged, he promised, bending to kiss her right there on the public street, unconcerned with the scandalized looks of passing society matrons. In the summer of 1889, a letter arrived that Darlene had never expected. The elegant handwriting on the envelope was Lucille's. The woman who had once taken Darlene's husband now reached out from her home in Boston. Dearest Mrs. Quinn, you may be surprised to receive this letter, and I would understand completely if you choose not to read further. However, I have carried the weight of my actions for a decade now, and as I face my own mortality, the doctors give me less than a year, I find myself compelled to seek forgiveness where I have done the greatest harm. What I did to your marriage was unforgivable. I was young, selfish, and blinded by what I believed was love. I understand now that what Jeremiah and I shared was nothing more than mutual desperation, he to escape his failures, I to escape my father's control. I have heard of your happiness with Mr. Quinn, of your beautiful children and prosperous ranch. This brings me more joy than you can know. Sometimes the greatest wrongs lead us to where we truly belong, though this does not excuse the pain caused along the way. I ask not for your forgiveness, as I have no right to it, but simply that you know of my profound regret. With sincere respect, Lucille Harmon Bradford. Darlene sat for a long while on the porch, the letter in her lap, watching Tommy teach little Elizabeth how to throw a lariat in the yard. Nathaniel found her there, her expression thoughtful but serene. Bad news? He asked, settling beside her. She handed him the letter. Just ghosts from the past. He read it silently, then folded it carefully and returned it to her. Will you answer her? I think I should, Darlene decided. Not for her sake, really, but for mine, to close that chapter completely. That evening, after the children were asleep, she wrote her reply. Dear Mrs. Bradford, your letter was unexpected but not unwelcome. I forgave you and Jeremiah many years ago, though I never thought to have the opportunity to say so directly. You speak of wrongs leading to where we truly belong, and in this, you are entirely correct. Had you not entered our lives, I might never have found the courage to seek my own path. For this, ironically, I must thank you. I am sorry to hear of your illness. Whatever our past, I wish you peace in the days ahead. We are all simply travelers trying to find our way home, sometimes taking detours we never anticipated. With genuine good wishes, Darlene Quinn. Time continued its relentless march. Tommy grew into a thoughtful young man who combined his father's ranching instincts with his mother's head for business. Elizabeth, spirited and independent, announced at 12 that she intended to become a doctor, a declaration that surprised no one who knew her compassionate nature and fearless curiosity. In 1895, as Darlene approached her 46th birthday, she and Nathaniel stood together on their porch, watching the sunset as they had countless times before. His hair had silvered at the temples, lines of laughter and weather marking his face. She too had changed, her figure softened by motherhood, strands of gray threading through her chestnut hair. You remember what you said to me that day in town? She asked suddenly. When I told you Jeremiah wanted me back, Nathaniel's brow furrowed. Can't say that I do. What did I say? You told me I had options I didn't have before, that I wasn't the same woman he left behind. She turned to face him, taking his weathered hands in hers. You were the first person who ever truly saw me, Nathaniel, not as someone's wife or mother, but as myself. His eyes, Still, that same intense blue that had captured her attention all those years ago softened with emotion. I just saw what was already there. No, she disagreed gently. You saw what could be there if given the chance to grow. He drew her into his arms, a gesture as familiar and necessary as breathing. Best decision I ever made, bringing you to the Broken Spur. Second best, she corrected with a smile. The best was asking me to stay. Inside, they could hear Elizabeth playing the piano Nathaniel had brought all the way from Denver for her last birthday, Tommy's deeper voice occasionally joining her in song. Beyond the house, the Broken Spur spread in all directions, cattle grazing peacefully in the evening light, hands returning from their day's work, smoke rising from the bunkhouse chimney. You know, Nathaniel said thoughtfully, when my father built this place, he told me that a ranch wasn't just land and livestock. It was a future, something that would outlast us all. Darlene nodded, understanding perfectly. And we've built that future, haven't we? Not just in the ranch, but in Tommy and Elizabeth. In what we've taught them about love and commitment. About second chances, Nathaniel added, pressing a kiss to her temple. And recognizing fools when you see them. Darlene laughed, remembering that moment of clarity when a gruff cowboy had stated so plainly what she'd been afraid to admit even to herself. My husband left me for a younger woman, she had cried, the pain still raw and bleeding. He was a fool, Nathaniel had declared, and in those 4 simple words had offered her a new perspective. A way to see her worth that had nothing to do with Jeremiah's choices. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Darlene leaned her head against Nathaniel's shoulder, gratitude filling her heart for the journey that had brought her here to this man, this family, this life that had exceeded every dream she'd never dared to dream. Come inside, she said softly. Our children are waiting. Hand in hand, they walked toward the warm light spilling from the windows of their home, the place where heartbreak had transformed into healing, where abandonment had led to belonging, where a woman once defined by rejection had found her truest self in the arms of a cowboy wise enough to recognize her value all along.